And joining me now from Montreal is David Freiheit. Welcome to the CJN Daily.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to meet you. And we're speaking now about 3 weeks after the Canadian election, give or take 3.5 weeks. And I was listening to, one of your recent podcasts about the experience, and you used the word journey. You were going on a journey, and that's why you put your name in. So I want to ask you about this journey. What was the reason you used that word? It was an interesting word for why you ran.
A journey is a good way to describe it because it is a process, and it was a process, spiritually before making the decision, and then bureaucratically after having made the decision. I swear to you, I never wanted to run for politics. I may never do it again. We'll just see what the world has in store for us. But I never wanted to do it. You don't leave the practice of law, the what I call the toxic environment of the practice of law, to then jump into the toxic environment of politics. But over the last 2 years, seeing where Canada has gone, and it's not a direction I like or want to see Canada going, spiritually, it was the evolution to make the decision. Once I made the decision, bureaucratically, running an election is a complicated thing. Just paper wise, bureaucratically, intuitively, you need to go get approved by the party. You need to put filing papers with the government. It was a whole big thing. You got to open a bank account. You got to get a team. You got to run a campaign, which itself was another journey as well. So there was a spiritual journey getting to the decision, and then there was the continued journey 2.0 of the process itself, which was eye-opening.
So you've also said, we might as well tell the listeners, you came in 6th place in your riding with 1,400 votes, give or take. I don't know how it is since they've said
1,498 votes.
There you go.
not that I'm counting and a little disappointed.
Yes, you are. But tell us how that changed from the party's 2019 results in your riding, where another person ran. I mean, what was the incremental change?
It was a 300% increase, but call me spoiled, or maybe I had unreasonable expectations. I wasn't happy with it. I did think, on the one hand, I thought I could make more of an impact, and I thought let's call it the guerrilla campaigning, doing podcasts, doing stuff that the people already established don't do. I thought it would have more of an impact. You realize after having run the race that I reached one person at a time, and maybe a handful at a time, and it was meaningful and it was impactful, and you can convince and change the minds of one person at a time. But then you just realize, like, once you have the media and you reach swaths of people at a time, you're not fighting a battle with the same weapons. And so I had to go convince people one person at a time, and then mainstream media will, I'll say brainwash because that's the way I believe it is. They will go and run stories and just reach the entire city. And they'll reach the entire city with top level 30-second headline news, no meaningful discussions. And then people think that they're sufficiently informed and think they understand the issues to go vote Liberal 53% like they did again in Westmount. So it was asymmetrical political campaigning. I thought I would have done better, and I was a little disappointed when I didn't reach the number of people I thought I was ultimately going to reach. But, the party nationwide, threefold increase. I had a 300% increase in our riding. And like people do say, that's 1,500 people in Westmount who heard the message, agreed with the message, and placed enough confidence in me to vote for me. We'll just have to hope that we can do better the next time. Or, if people are happy with the Liberals, keep voting in the Liberals, 50 some odd +% in our riding, they'll keep doing that if they like it.
A lot of people who were watching this short double high election campaign, 36 days, saw that there was people screaming at Trudeau, there was swearing, there were the gravel throwing. It was anti-Semitism thrown at, and anti-Israel, thrown at the Green Party. What do you make of, first of all, do you agree that the tone of this election and the country at the moment is a lot angrier and scarier than it has been in the last few elections? And what do you make of that change? I mean, you're riding that wave, right? So,
well, I definitely, the tone is angrier. I'll just say this flat out. You can say what you want, with limited exceptions. Violence is where I have a hard line being drawn without exception. So no throwing gravel, no smashing eggs, period. Bernier got egged, and I think there's unacceptable, period, full stop, no but. As far as the rhetoric goes, it's an election. It's heated. And I'm going to say this, when people say the sentiment and the rhetoric is heated, when you have a prime minister coming out on a podium and stumping his fist down saying those people are putting us all at risk, referring to anyone who opposes masks or vaccine passports as misogynists or racists. I mean, you have the highest level of political power in the country using that language. That's where it starts. That's not where it ends. And so if you want to talk about how it got there or how the language is so heated, when you write people off as racist, misogynist, selfish, right-wing extremists because you don't want or you don't believe in mask mandates or vaccine mandates, that's an escalation that demonizes millions and millions of people. And you can expect them to react with equally heated rhetoric, if not more so, because you are being vilified by the leader that is supposed to be representing all Canadians, not vilifying the ones that don't agree with him. And you had it from Trudeau. You had it from Jagmeet Singh, calling people who don't believe in the mask selfish right-wing extremists who don't care about community, et cetera, et cetera. And then lo and behold, you have Jagmeet Singh getting caught breaking the very same rules, not wearing the very same mask. So it was heated. And if it was heated, it was certainly because the leaders of the parties were demonizing swaths of the population and shoving down their throats policy, which is arguably scientific and arguably totally unscientific, unconstitutional, and telling them that if they don't shut up and take it, they must be misogynist, racist, xenophobe extremists. And that's how you divide a country from the top down. That's not how you unify it from the bottom up.
Okay, so I was in Westmount over Labor Day weekend, and I drove down the boulevard, and I saw a telephone pole, and there was your sign on top, and it was small, really small, and then there was the big Marc Garneau sign below. So was all the signs in terms of the proportion of size that way, or did you I know exactly. Go small for financial reasons?
So I know exactly which sign you're talking about. Someone subsequently pulled that sign down before the election was over. I was very happy with that sign because to get it there, I pulled my car onto the sidewalk on the hood to not interfere with Garneau's sign, but to get it above it. When I ordered those signs, and we ordered 200 of them, they looked bigger in the picture. It wasn't a budget issue. We were fortunate to have been able to raise enough money to run a proper campaign. So I didn't order the small signs for budget reasons. They looked bigger in the picture. And when I got them, I said, okay, it's good. It's good enough. We got 200 of them. They're easy to put up. They're fast to put up. But then we ordered the big signs afterwards, and we ordered 50 very big signs, which looked magnificent. But at the end of the day, people who vote the way they vote, they'll see the signs and they won't even understand what the signs are. I was putting up one of my signs. Someone said, oh, you're running with the Liberals. And I said, no, purple PPC. And they said, oh, I'm voting Liberal anyhow. So it's like the signs have a limited function, but they did have a function nonetheless. I was getting emails from surprising people, ex-colleagues, friends from school saying, I saw your posters, you got my vote. It was encouraging. But I put up each and every one of those signs myself, with the exception of about 25 of the big signs where we had volunteers help.
I have a picture of that post if you want it, because I took a picture as I was driving.
A good one.
And I'll send it to you. But in terms of being one of the two, or I don't know if there are any more Jewish candidates for the PPC, I'm sure you had people push back and say, what are you doing? You're a Jewish guy. There's a lot of controversy about this party. What in the hell are you thinking? So how did you respond to them?
So the funny thing is, I'm not vocal about being Jewish, not out of shame or anything. I don't want people thinking that my religious identity shapes what I would put out in terms of political message. And I don't want people thinking that my identity defines what shapes what I think or shapes my judgment of what other people think. So I'm not vocal about it. And I don't like identity politics where people, tend to think that their views are either more justified because of their identity, or other people's views are less justified because of their identity or their absence of identity. So I'm not particularly vocal about it. I did not get that type of pushback. What I did get was the standard, oh, that's an extremist party of racists and anti-immigrants. And I was like, well, whenever I got that, I didn't say, well, I'm Jewish and therefore that can't be true, because that's a bad argument. What I did just say is, if you think that, go look at the roster of candidates and come to your own conclusion. And I said, I hate reducing candidates to their racial, ethnic, religious identity to counter these arguments. But if that's what you think, go look at the roster and compare, and then see if you can still justify that foregone conclusion you already had. And then I also say, you don't even know what the policies are to come to that conclusion. To say that the party's racist or xenophobic or whatever because it wants to curb immigration so that it can deal and properly deal with Canadian issues, you're presupposing that Canadians are all white Catholic males. I mean, you're making racist presuppositions to come to that conclusion. So whenever I got that pushback, it wasn't specifically, oh, you're a Jewish kid, what are you running with the PPC for? It was PPCs, yada, yada, yada. I had my reflexive responses, and then I had the substantive ones, which were, go read the policies, go read the party message. And if you still think it's racist, you might be suffering from certain presuppositions, which themselves could be questionable.
Let's unpack this issue a little bit, because I have watched your posts on social media where you definitely defend vilification of Israel, and you definitely go after people who use the Holocaust denial trope in their social media.
So let's unpack it. Go back to the beginning. I am a proponent of freedom of speech, even if we really genuinely hate the speech. And so you say Holocaust denial. I don't support Holocaust denial, full stop. So that's one thing. Let's get that clear. And, so there's no misunderstanding. Does that mean I think people should be legally prohibited from engaging in certain discussion? That's a very big secondary issue. I think people should be free to discuss things to the extent it's not, specific incitement of violence. Where I take issue with the comparisons are, on the one hand, sometimes they are insensitive, sometimes they are done on both ends just to shut discussion down, and they don't lead anywhere productive. And generally speaking, also, they are used to reflexively demonize anybody who is espousing an opposing view by calling them, the N-word, which on YouTube we have to say Yahtzee because you can't say the N-word anymore. But no, it's a nuanced debate. I have issues with people using the analogies too flippantly on both ends of the spectrum. I guess it.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so maybe that means I'm sucking and blowing at the same time, because I don't like. They're dangerous comparisons in general. Dangerous on the one hand because they are reflexively used to discredit people, and dangerous on the other hand because it's not everything that is tantamount to 1930s Germany. So I mean, it's a nuanced debate, but it depends on the issue, because I said when Gina Carano made the post, it was dangerous. When CNN refers to things as the big lie, it's dangerous because they are in fact invoking anti-Semitic tropes to politically demonize their ideological adversaries today.
Talk to me about anti-vaxxers and the use of the yellow star, who have been visible on the streets, not just in Toronto, Montreal, everywhere. What is that? How do you deal with, or how do you accept those? Because again, freedom of speech, right? But still.
No, for sure. And when I go to the protests, I see people holding up signs comparing Legault to Hitler. I see people with the Jewish stars to symbolize what they feel to be, similar discriminatory practices today. I don't like it. It's not the way I would promote the message, because I think it does just allow other people to too easily discredit the opposition. You look at someone making that very visceral comparison, and people will discredit them as being extremists. Ideological extremists. I'm using the word loosely. So I don't like it. It's not the way I promote the message. I will, unfortunately and unpopularly, defend their right to do it. But on the underlying message underneath all of it, which is why I don't like the comparisons, because it distracts from the discussion, these vaccine passport rules are purely discriminatory, and they're purely arbitrary, and they're purely unscientific, and they are causing the same social divisions that we have seen historically. Now, it has not yet materialized in the way it has materialized in other eras in Mao's China or Nazi Germany. But there are certain comparisons, there are certain similarities, and then there are certain radical differences. I don't like that type of discourse because it just gets too easily written off, and I prefer to have the substantive discussion on the ideas. But people will express themselves in the manner that they choose, and that's what a free and democratic society ought to be.
What's the worst anti-Semitic thing that you've ever personally experienced or know about that affected you? Me personally?
This is going to be a bold statement. I don't necessarily believe in anti-Semitism, racism, misogyny. I believe in, can I swear on the podcast? I believe in a-holes. So I believe there are people who are going to look at someone having done something and say, oh, they're wearing a kippah, they did it because they're Jewish. Oh, they're black, they did it because they're black. So I have had my experiences of what we call anti-Semitism. I can share them, but I don't share them because I don't view them as being representative of policy or any broader thing other than, a couple of individuals who I would not, I think have certain issues in terms of how they assess things that go on in the world. And so they tend to blame any wrongdoing on the identity of the wrongdoer, or they suffer from certain prejudices. And so, I mean, I've had my experiences. I lived in Quebec City for 4 years. I had experiences. I used to work at a bike shop in Montreal. I had my experiences. But on the one hand, I don't let them define me, and I don't let those experiences define my perception of society. I don't view Canadian society as inherently anti-Semitic, anti-Islam, racist, misogynist. I view Canadian society as fundamentally tolerant, and you will have incidents that I do not think indicate a broader systemic problem that you oftentimes will see other people reflexively invoke. Maybe it may be very unpopular, but
except that they had murdered a family in London this summer, and the mosque. You said you were in Quebec City, the mosque shooting. So obviously, there's a problem with Canadian society. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh, we're not that society," but we are. Jews were being attacked in Montreal last spring, in the streets. Worst thing that we've ever experienced in my lifetime. So,
well, so there's two things here. Criminality is a problem, and there is no. There's no way to downplay the atrocity. So there's no point in doing that. The question is, do you look at that atrocity and say that this is symbolic of policy issues? This is symbolic of something that Canadian society tolerates? Obviously it isn't, because after that horrific incident in Ontario, you had thousands of people standing together as one to mourn the tragedy. And so it's not.
And then at the end, the imam blamed Israel for it on live television.
That is a bigger problem. I mean, there's no question that within the parties there are people who are going to, say very stupid things that might encourage other people to go do similar things. There's no question. And after it
wasn't a party, he was an imam. But
and after Quebec lost the second referendum, you blame the ethnics and you blame the money vote, which we know what it meant. So you have these incidents. Now the question is, do you look at these incidents and say that they define Canadian culture and Canadian society, or do you look at these incidents as criminal elements that will exist in any society that picked on that aspect for that particular element of crime? And so, I mean, that depends on how you view it. I look at Canadian society. There are, especially when things get divided in Israel, you see reaction in Quebec or in Canada. When there's conflict elsewhere, you see reactions locally. That happens. Does that mean that Canadian society supports it, that it defines Canadian society, that it is a pandemic of sorts within Canadian society? I would disagree. So, and then the issue is, when these things happen, do you then say, well, this is now indicative of a broader problem in Canada? My impression is that by doing that, and when Justin Trudeau comes out and takes exceptional examples of atrocities and then tries to paint them into the rule, it only ends up creating more divide, more divisiveness, and more suspicion among the different ethnicities and races and Canadians. It creates divide and suspicion among Canadians. And so the issue is, when you have an atrocity like that, what's the best reaction? What is it indicative of? And do you try to weaponize it politically to create further divide? And that is unfortunately the way I view a lot of the responses from Trudeau and the party, is to take these things.
All the other party leaders spoke to. Maxime Bernier also spoke about anti-Semitism and IRA and things like that. So it's not just, they all had to.
No,
you support IRA.
The IRA what?
The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is a pledge that countries adopted. Canada adopted it. Provincial cities, Montreal has not, but most of the other cities around have, to outlaw and condemn and work to, it's about Holocaust denial. It's about what you said, othering by race, when it's not about race. If someone hits your car and they're Jewish, it's about that they're a bad driver, things like that. There's a whole 20.
I thought for a second when you said IRA, I thought you meant the Irish Republican Army, and I had no idea why.
All right, let's start again. We'll start again. So do you know what I'm talking about now?
100%. Look, it's, so here's the other thing, which is, it's a nuance.
Because this is a free speech issue for you, I think.
Well, no, it is. I think everybody, you should recognize you should recognize the Holocaust. You should recognize international atrocities. Where it becomes politicized and where it becomes weaponized is when you have some groups saying we want to recognize and create a legislation with respect to the Holocaust, and then simultaneously not wanting to recognize the Armenian genocide or other examples of genocide that have occurred. And that's where again you create a big divide by saying I want to recognize our genocide but not others. So I all of them need to be learned. They need to be taught. We need to learn from them, and we need to ensure that they never happen again. And it doesn't happen by prioritizing victimhood. It comes from condemning atrocities and using the most concrete examples that have occurred as the absolute tool to make sure that people learn, understand what happened, how it came to be, and what you have to do to ensure it never happens again.
Well, David, a lot of people who support the anti-vax movement, conspiracy theorists, people who listen to your work, they feel victimized as well, do they not?
People don't want this vaccine. It's a new vaccine. They have their suspicions. If the vaccine works, vaccine passports are useless. If the vaccine doesn't work, vaccine passports are useless. People do not want to have their civil rights predicated on being compelled to take a very young vaccine with a new technology for a virus that has a 99.9 whatever survival rate higher among demographics. If that makes them an anti-vaxxer, we're not using language properly. But you have those people, they feel marginalized, they feel abused, and they feel discriminated against because they are being marginalized, abused, and discriminated against. And the only question is now, in a time of a pandemic, how do you balance individual rights with what might be helpful under the circumstances? And the idea now that we've gone, you're an anti-vaxxer if you don't want to vaccinate your 12-year-old. We're using that term the way we're using the big lie, vaccine deniers. We're using it to discredit people so that we don't have to address their actual legitimate opinions.
I should ask how old your kids are.
They are 12, 8, and 5. And now the government is talking about compelling vaccination. And it's not compelling. They're just going to deprive you of your civil rights. And they're talking about doing this now on children as young as 5 for a demographic that has a 99.9973 survival of infection rate. There were 15 deaths in Canada of under 19 of 300,000 infected. That's 0.00005% fatality rate, less than the flu. And now the government's going to tell me that my kids are going to have a compromised childhood, that they won't be able to be normal children unless they get double vaccinated with a new vaccine for a virus that poses virtually no risk to them. And if that makes someone an anti-vaxxer, we are abusing language for political purposes.
Where does all this emotion go? The election's over for whatever the results were, and it's not going to go away. What's next for this group, this large group of really upset people in Canada, do you think?
Well, by the looks of it, it's not getting better anytime soon, because in addition to all the heated rhetoric during the campaign coming from Trudeau himself, $600+ million later, and the status quo in Ottawa, now you have a government that is a minority government elected with what I think was historically the smallest amount of votes ever, now imposing interprovincial travel restrictions on children as young as 12 if they're not double vaccinated. It's not going to get better anytime soon. And maybe it has to get worse before it gets better, and we'll have an election in 18 to 24 months because it's a third minority government. It's not going to last any longer than the last one. And hopefully more people will wake up, and hopefully the leaders of these parties will get voted out.
All right. Well, it's been really interesting to hear from you and hear, your takeaways on your experience, your journey, as you put it, for running in the last election. And we'll see what comes next. We'll be watching. We'll put the link to your site on our show notes. And thank you again so much for being on the CJN Daily.
Thank you very much for having me.